Hi, I'm at the dressing room with Bill Ward, who plays Gerald in The Full Monty. Thanks so much for bringing me in this morning, Bill. This was my third time reviewing The Full Monty. The other two was with Gary Lucy, who I worked with in Hollyoaks back in 2000. But this one felt like being a gigantic hen night. How did those last 15 minutes feel?
Thanks for coming in, Kelvin. Thanks for talking to us. Well, for us, this play is about the previous hour and a half.
Yeah.
So what this play is about is men's issues, essentially. And it's essentially about what happens to a group of men who've lost everything.
Yeah.
And they've lost their dignity, they've lost their jobs, they've lost their income, they've lost the ability to look after their families, and it's about how that affects them.
Yeah.
So some of them
the psychological
so some of them have depression issues, some of them have body image issues, some of them have been lying to their spouses about whether they have a job or not. Some of there's all sorts of issues about fathers' rights running through this play as well. So it's the foundation of this play is something very, very serious, and actually at its sort of at its base level, it's a tragedy. But out of the tragedy comes comedy. And we had Simon Beaufort, who's the writer on this and who wrote the original screenplay, and he wrote this play version of it back in 2013, came to see us about 3 weeks ago, and he was really clear with us about to play the play.
Yep.
He said
you don't play it for the end, you play it for what's going on.
Yeah. So this isn't a play about stripping.
No.
The men strip.
No.
And they strip because they've lost their dignity and they're trying to find a way of getting it back. But as Michael Gingell, who's the director on this and has been brilliant with us, absolutely brilliant, as he has been very, very clear with us all the way through, this is not about the stripping. This play is not about the stripping. This play is about why these men strip.
Yeah.
So there is stripping involved. There's a whole load of it, as you say, in the final 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It is a massive amount of fun to do.
Oh, I can imagine
and
that.
all of the characters, we all invest in it, and it's great fun to do. But that's not what the play is about. The play is about why they strip, and that's what we go at from an acting point of view.
Yeah.
That's what we've spent the time on.
Well, that really came over. That really came over.
Yeah.
Which actually brings me on to my next question. Out of all the lads, do you think Gerald goes on the greatest journey to find himself and be accepted by the other lads?
It's a really good question. All of the characters are on a journey. All of them. Every single one of them has something to overcome. So Gaz and Dave, who are really, they carry the narrative of the show, I think, in lots of ways.
No, definitely.
Yeah, Gaz, Dave and Nathan are the characters who really carry the narrative. And they've lost their jobs. Gaz is having real trouble seeing his son Nathan, who because he hasn't paid maintenance and because he can't afford to, because he's lost his job in the steelworks. They're on a sort of a mission of redemption. Essentially, they're trying to work out how they can earn money again. And we're in a time, it's set in 1997, so we're in a time where they're skilled steelworkers, crane drivers and skilled steelworkers. And those kind of jobs just aren't available in Sheffield anymore because all of the steelworks have been shut down.
Exactly the same as the pits in Northumberland at
Right.
the same time. It was all the same time, wasn't it?
Shipbuilding, it all closed, all at the same time. And as you allude to, I'm from Northumberland, I'm from Newcastle upon Tyne. And, I can completely identify with this. When I was growing up, unemployment was around 17 or 18% in Newcastle, somewhere between 16 and 18% when I was growing up, because the mines had shipyards had shut, and there hadn't been anything that had taken its place. So in that kind of way, all of these characters, Lomper, who's the next character that we meet, is trying to kill himself. And he used to work in the cafe, and then we meet Gerald, he's the foreman. He's Gaz and Dave's foreman. He's also unemployed. Spoiler alert: he hasn't told his wife. So all of these characters, Horse is who we meet later on. He is. He hasn't had a job for a while, and he's looking, desperately searching for something to do, something to fill his life. He's single, he doesn't have sort of a reason to kind of motivate him. And then Guy is sort of a bit of an odd job man, and we kind of pick him up. So all of these characters, Guy has been through a quite a difficult relationship where, again, spoiler alert, we find out that his partner has died. Yeah. And he's sort of seeking sort of love and redemption, and so in all sorts of ways, all of these characters are on a journey, all of them, and and that's the power of the play.
Oh, definitely.
Is you're rooting for every single one of them as they overcome the various sort of individual sorts of tragedies, I suppose, that have befallen them. Having said all of that, the play is very, very, very funny.
It is a very comical play. I mean, that's why I sort of like said about the two plays I reviewed. They seem to be a more mixed audience than last night.
Yeah.
I think the girls have taken over now and stopped the men from coming to see it.
Yeah, we've got a brilliant company of women in this company of actors as well, who are just magnificent. So, yeah.
Although the Full Monty is a period play, with the cost of living crisis, do you think it could be updated to 2023, or don't you think that lads would react the same way as they did say back then?
I think it's all of the issues. The reason why it still works is that none of these issues have gone away.
No, true.
So we've got, like you say, we've got a cost of living crisis. There are an awful lot of families in this country who are really struggling to make ends meet, struggling to buy food, struggling to buy petrol, struggling to pay their electricity and gas bills. Unemployment might be statistically down, but there's, instead of unemployment, you've got 0 hours contracts with people technically employed but not working.
No.
Or if they are working, they're working for £10.45 or £10.50 an hour, and maybe only 1 day a week, 2 days a week, and having to hold down 3 or 4 jobs to make it through. So in those kinds of ways, all of the raw materials still exist, and what is fascinating to us is that this play still works. 30 years on, sort of nearly, well, certainly 25 years, 25th anniversary this year.
Wow.
But but this play still works. Male depression still exists, body image still exists. All of the issues that affect these men, all of these things still exist. And for me, that's quite interesting that we haven't really moved on at all in terms of what is affecting these men and their psyche, in terms of dignity, in terms of breadwinning, all of those kinds of things. So all of those themes are still alive and present in 2023 Britain.
Well, I'm part of Andy's fan club. You know, it's okay to talk because of all the mental health issues, and male suicides, especially the youngers, are at the highest that they've ever been.
Well, it's one of the highest killers, isn't it, amongst teenagers and early 20s in this country. So, yeah, it's very much of the moment.
I've seen you in Spamalot a little while ago. Would you like to play Gerald in the American musical version of the Full Monty?
Do you know, I don't think I've ever seen it. I've had a friend in it. I love Gerald.
Yeah, he's great. I love him. Yeah.
I love him because he's trying to do the right thing, but he's doing it in the wrong way. And so for me, he's motivated by love for his wife. He doesn't want to let his wife down, and he's desperately trying to make everything right. Except he can't fess up to her about what exactly has happened. But we've talked, me and Suzanne, who's brilliant, who plays Linda, Gerald's wife. We talk. I'm not going to mention what happens later in the play, but we've kind of talked very much about the future life of these characters. Do they love each other? And we think they do,
and they'll survive.
Yeah, and that they would somehow sort of try and make things right in the future. And so for me, I love Gerald. He's great fun because he's a repressed individual, so he doesn't show much, but it's all going on. You see sparks, you see shafts of light into what makes him tick, but the rest of the time he keeps everything very, very bolted down, very, very covered up. So I've really, really enjoyed it, and I'm playing it. And you know, it's not often you get to do a play which is this well attended.
Totally sold out last night.
Yeah, and we've been sold out in Buxton and sold out in Cheltenham. So
because you're quite early in the run now, aren't you?
Yeah, we're sort of in our third week. So to do a play which is this well attended, sort of in a post-COVID way, is brilliant, and we're loving it.
Going back to your early days in Newcastle, I'm half a Geordie, my dad was from Ashington. How did the acting bug bite in Newcastle, and did you get any ribbon for wanting to become an actor?
Yeah, well, I'm not from a family of actors at all. My dad was a butcher, and my granddad was a shipbuilder. On the other side of the family, we've got printers. So no one in my family has ever been an actor before, and so it was a bit of a shock to everybody, including me, when I decided to do it. But it was when I was 32, so I didn't.
Oh, you slightly late as well.
Yeah, I didn't start acting until I was 32. I had a proper job. I worked in London for advertising agencies until I was 32. I worked for sort of two big agencies, BBH, Bartle Bogle Hegarty, and Saatchi & Saatchi, which were two top 20 worldwide advertising agencies. I was an account director, I was a strategic planner for both of those. So, but all of the time, I'd only ever wanted to do two things. One was to work in advertising, and I used to watch the telly a lot, and I used to watch when I was growing up, and I used to love the adverts. I used to love the simplicity of the ideas, and so I used to love that growing up. But so one was to work in advertising, and I did that, and I was quite good at it, and I really loved it. But I had biting at the back of my head what if. And when I was 33, I went travelling for a couple of years, and I came back, and I just thought, I've just got to give this a go. I've just got to find out.
I can totally relate to that, because I was 28
when
I started. I was a works convener for the Apex Union at GEC in rugby. So I can relate to that completely. In 2010, I worked with the photographer Spencer Tunick on 2 installations, stripping naked on the steps of Sydney Opera House and a smaller installation on the rocks of the beach in Sydney. What are the origins of your successful photography business?
God bless you. Well, thank you for bringing it up. It's the other side of me. So it's what I do when I'm not an actor, and so I'm half a professional actor, half a professional landscape photographer, and I have been since about 2010. So what I do, and when I go touring, is when I'm not acting, I'll take my camera. So I take my camera to everywhere that I go, and I'll do a project. I'll have a number of kind of projects going on whilst I'm working. I won't go every day, because if you do what we do for a living, you have to keep some energy for the evening, because the evening... Oh,
you've got to rest, haven't you?
Yeah, and the evening is the reason why you're here. And so I always, if I'm going to take pictures, I'll only go out for an hour and a half, 2 maximum. So to conserve energy, so we can smash it in the evening. But having said all of that, I do find it's useful to have another focus when you're touring, because we're touring and we're in Coventry this week, as you know, and so we're here from Monday to Saturday. We're rehearsing quite a lot during the week to rehearse and understudies, because it's still quite early in the run, and we're doing evening performances, and we've got a couple of matinees. But outside of that time and elsewhere on the tour, even though you've got shows in the evening and a couple of matinees in a week, you've often got quite a bit of daytime during the day, and the question is, what do you do with that time? So for me, I love to fill it with photography projects. So I will generally wander around. I always try and get digs. A room in somebody's house, that's where we stay as actors when we're touring. I always try and get digs within walking distance of the theatre, and I'll take my camera from where the digs are into the theatre, and I'll photograph what I bump into along the way. And I have all sorts of different themes. I'm a water photographer, really, but you don't get water in every city. But I will often try and seek it out, and on the way to seeking it out, I'll do a project on concrete or urban trees or whatever catches my eye.
The Two-Tone Museum is well worth visiting in Coventry.
The specials.
Specials, for the concrete. Because the concrete...
Is it brutalist?
It is quite brutalist,
No, and so that's kind of how it integrates with my acting work. And then outside of that, I'm a landscape photographer, and it's a yin-yang thing for this business. I love what I do for a living. I love it. but you're often sort of in the company of hugely vibrant, energetic humans.
Yeah.
And for me, I can't live at that pace all of the time.
No, I can understand that.
Yeah, and I love it. But for me, I need some reflective time away from that, and that's where the photography comes in. So what I do when I'm not acting, and particularly at the end of a run of something, I'll go away. We have a camper van. I'll go in the camper van for a week, 2 weeks, probably up to somewhere like Northumberland, which is where I'm from, or the northwest coast of Scotland, or the Outer Hebrides. I spend a lot of time in the Outer Hebrides photographing them, and I'll just spend time hanging out with Mother Nature and just rebalancing essentially, and sort of it's that thing where you just put stuff back into yourself and just get back on an equilibrium. And so for me, that's how I kind of put the two things together. And then I teach it as well now. I teach a lot of photography. I teach a particular branch of it called intentional camera movement, where you deliberately move the camera and keep the shutter open whilst taking a photograph. I teach multiple exposure photography, sort of opening, keeping the shutter open and layering frames on top of each other in a camera. Creative photography is what I teach. So I'm doing that at the same time as taking photographs, and all of that is very much the other part of me. It's a yin-yang thing for me. It's very much the balance versus the day job.
Did you find lockdown and that a way then of sort of like escaping a little bit by going for walks and taking photos?
Yeah, that was interesting. I loved lockdown because for me, I'm usually touring.
Yeah.
So, and I was touring actually at the time. I was touring the Glee Club for Out of Joint, who've now become Stockroom. Brilliant theatre company. Kate Wasserberg, what an extraordinary woman she is. Brilliant artistic director. She's just taken over at Theatre Clwyd. And I was touring that, and we just got shut down when the theatres got shut down. We got shut down in the day. And but for me, it was brilliant to be at home. Yeah. I saw my kids, I saw my other half. We actually hung out and spent quality time doing all of the home. My kids are quite young, and doing all of the homeschooling. But photographically, it was interesting because you weren't allowed to go anywhere. So you were only allowed to go within whatever
in your area that you live in.
For an hour.
Yeah.
So we would go out on our bikes, or we'd go out around the local park, and I did a project on the local park. And in our local park, I live in Bristol. There were all sorts of very interesting things, artistic creations that popped up around the local park. So I did a project on that, and I did a project on COVID, and did a project on the COVID signs, and I did a project on how people were coping with it. And I photographed our local playground, which was just covered in sort of hazard tape. You weren't allowed on it, and it was pretty bleak. That was and it was literally on the first day of what would have been the school holidays, and the school playground or the playground in the local park is covered in hazard tape, and no one's allowed on it. It's pretty bleak time, all of that. So I did lots of photographic projects that I wouldn't otherwise have done. So by having to stay local, because generally I'd be going to Scotland, I'd be going to Iceland, I'd be going, to the Hebrides, all of those kinds of places, but I couldn't. And the other thing I did was I did a photographic project on autumn in our local park.
That would have been beautiful.
Which was magnificent. I really enjoyed it, and also spring. And for me, I've never really photographed flowers, but it was really interesting for me. There was a sense of, what life must go on, and regeneration, and for the first time, I mean, you always notice blossom because it's such a beautiful thing, and it comes after winter when everything's died and nature's regrouping, but I've never photographed it before. And for the first time, I felt motivated to photograph blossom. I had the best time taking pictures of buds just coming out, because it felt to me like the world was waking up again, having been sort of
locked down.
So
I could see that.
It's kind of photographic metaphors and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it was a hugely creative time photographically. And the other thing that I did was I did this book, and you won't be able to see, but this is Theatres in Danger.
Wow.
And I've taken photographs of every theatre that I've worked in for the last 15 years.
Wow, that's been fascinating.
Yeah, and I haven't done it here yet in the Belgrade, but in Buxton Opera House, where we've just been, which is an original Matcham theatre, and in Cheltenham Everyman, which is also a Matcham theatre. And I've been taking pictures of the interiors of theatres for 15 years, but I'd never done anything with it. So when lockdown happened, I started, and all of the theatres started to shut, and there were a couple of months where 3 or 4 theatres were out of business. And basically 80% of the country's theatres would have gone under without the Culture Recovery Fund, because all of the not all of the funding, but increasingly because of austerity over the last 10 years, so much of theatre funding now comes from audiences. So if you lock the audiences out, you cut off the funding to theatres almost completely. As a general rule, not for every theatre, but as a general rule, that was the case. So I started posting pictures of theatres that I'd worked in to Instagram, and because I have a photography Instagram, at Bill Ward Photography, for those of you who may be interested in having a look. And so that's what I started doing. And a photo journalist friend of mine, Matty Graham, who's a brilliant photographer in his own right, he noticed what I'd been up to, and he got in touch with me and said, would you like to make a book of the photographs that you've been posting? And I said, well, I've never made a book before, I wouldn't know where to start. And he's, as well as being a brilliant photographer in his own right and a writer, he's also a designer. So he designed the book for me, and we put it together, and so all the proceeds from this book go to the Theatres Trust, who did the most magnificent job, very quietly, very under the radar, getting theatres through the pandemic, very quietly helping theatres reopen, very quietly helping theatres restructure financially or in terms of organisation to stay afloat during the pandemic when none of the audiences, their income stream was effectively completely destroyed.
Well, so it was, wasn't it? And also what I liked about it all, as we came out of the pandemic, was the camaraderie, whereas swings, everybody just got involved, and people were even getting phone calls to say, you knew the part 6 months ago. Would you come and work on stage for us in Les Mis, for example? I was lucky enough to get a television job 6 months into lockdown, which with Leslie Sharp actually, who was in the original version of the Full Monty, and it also in the version that's currently on Disney Plus. Brilliant, wonderful actor, extraordinarily talented, and but we were out in Belgium. Filming that Before We Die was the project. It was a remake of a Scandi noir thing. I've watched it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's great fun. Dark,
very dark. Very dark.
But what was interesting about that was the first job for pretty much all of the crew, much all of the cast through the pandemic. We were 6 months in, and so everyone went the extra mile. So everyone was working round the clock on that, because there was all the social distancing, all of that. We were all having to rehearse in masks and wear masks in the makeup chairs, all of that kind of stuff. And there was all sorts of very touch and go bits there where, the Belgian government weren't sure if they were going to continue to allow filming and all that. So in that kind of way, there's very much a sense of pulling together during the pandemic and the business looking after itself and looking after each other.
Finally, Bill, a lot of the casting directors now, the continuing dramas or soaps as they used to be known, are bringing back characters from the dead. Cindy has just come back in EastEnders. Could you see Tracy Barlow finding you in her shower, or is that
Well, funnily enough, I've already come back from the dead in Emmerdale.
Oh, wow.
So I was in, as well as being in Coronation Street for whatever it was, 430 odd episodes. I was in Emmerdale for about 330 from 2013 to 2016. And in 2017, I came back for a week's worth of episodes as a ghost.
Wow.
And to haunt my wife at the time, which was great, and kind of sit in the back seat of the car while she was driving and spooking her and all of those kind of things. So that was great fun, and anything is possible, isn't it?
Anything's possible in our business.
But truly, so never say never.
Thanks so much, Bill, for sparing the time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed meeting you and chatting to you.
Lovely to meet you, Kelvin. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming in.